Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight, and thank you for being with us here. Oops, there we go. This is our introduction to NPCA Advocacy Workshop. My name is Jonathan Pearson, the Advocacy Director at National Peace Corps Association. It's good to have you with us here tonight, and just wanted to let you know of a couple of things. As I noted, we are recording this conversation. And I want to show you the agenda for tonight. So we are going to kick it off here in a few minutes with a couple of guest speakers who will be talking about, we've divided this event this evening into 4 basic sessions. The first talking about how to seek and plan a meeting with lawmakers, how to make the case on key advocacy issues and talking points. We're going to do a quick spin around our website to see some of our advocacy resources and materials, and we'll close out the formal session with how to hold an effective advocacy meeting. That will mark the end of our formal program, but we will stick around for questions and answers, and we will offer you the opportunity to put questions in the chat as we go along. Depending on the time, we want to try to keep this time frame as laid out as best we can. So if we have a little time, we might try to ask some questions or answer some questions. We are off to a great start with 10 days into our National Days of Advocacy. We have 105 activities already in the planning stages. That's across 29 states. About a dozen activities have been held so far. Predominantly, these are meetings with lawmakers or their staff, but there are other things as well: virtual meetings, virtual letter writing sessions, advocacy trainings such as this tonight. But again, about a dozen activities have already taken place. About 20 more activities are scheduled, have a date and a time scheduled. And then there's about 75 other activities that are in the works in the planning stages. We want to keep going. We want to build on this. Let's get activities in all 50 states, and that is part of the effort we hope will happen through the activities coming from tonight and beyond. And I want to thank all of the people that you're about to meet for their spending time with us tonight to begin this discussion. So we're going to move on to the first part of our discussion. And it is how to seek and secure and plan a meeting with your lawmakers. And our 2 guests are both volunteer advocacy coordinators with us. Kirsty Morgan, who is a member of the Kansas City Peace Corps Association and has been a longtime advocacy coordinator there. And our newest advocacy coordinator, Daniel Lindbergh Lang, who is serving as advocacy coordinator in Nevada and is one of the 7,300 evacuees from just about a year ago. So let's get started with this conversation. And Kirsty, I want to start with you. You've had a lot of efforts over time in terms of securing meetings with members of Congress or their staff and Kansas City borders, borders Kansas and Missouri, so you kind of cover both states. And you've done it in both pre and during the pandemic. You did advocacy meetings last fall. So my question is, last fall, in the midst of the pandemic, did the process that you used to try to secure meetings, was it any different than when you were able to do face-to-face meetings in a district office? What was the same? What was different?
Thanks, Jonathan. And I wanted to say hello to everybody. Thanks for having me on this call. Yeah, I would say there have been some slight changes, and some parts of securing the meetings were the same. So the parts that are the same is that my normal process is about a month in advance. I either call or I email with staff members that I've already met with in the past, and I let them know that I'm interested in having a meeting. That's the normal process of securing the meetings. What is different, though, is well, and I wanted to add that I also give them dates. So I give them at least 2 dates to choose from, and then I follow up. So I might email first and then call back maybe a couple days later or a week later, or vice versa. What's different is that now it's virtual meetings. So I know some people decide that they leave it up to the people that are they're having the meeting with, letting them create the meeting. I just do it myself. So I just go ahead and schedule the virtual meeting. And I have in the past gone through NPCA or used someone else's, some of the people who are on our team, they've had their own personal accounts. It's very easy to get your own Zoom account or use a work account. So that part, I would just say, go ahead and schedule it yourself. So that is a little bit different. The other thing is who can be invited to the call. So in the past, of course, I've met with my district people and the staffers, and where I live, I do ask for the legislator, the Congress member, but I rarely get that. So I don't really come in expecting it, but I always put that ask out there. In this virtual world that we're in, it's very much an opportunity to meet with folks in DC. So I put out my request to meet with the staffers that are in charge of international affairs. And so what I do is I go through the district people, the ones I've met and had contacts with, and then ask them to arrange it with the DC folks. And so that's how I've been able to secure them. The other thing is that who you can include into these meetings is different. It's wider than it used to be. So I was able to work with other affiliate group members and have them in on these meetings as well. So I had the St. Louis group RPCVs, and then the Central Missouri RPCVs were also in on this call.
Right. So with your senators, you could bring in people from across the state.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's, I guess, a bonus of being in this pandemic, I guess.
Let's turn to Daniel. So Daniel, again, you're recently evacuated, although thank you for your service, and it's now been a year, but you jumped right into this and started organizing meetings in Nevada last fall. So for you, I believe it was kind of a first time experience for you. So what was it like for you as a first time organizer of an office meeting, and what advice would you have for people that might be in our audience and thinking about doing this for the first time?
Well, for me, one of the biggest things is advocating for the Peace Corps felt like a natural extension of being a Peace Corps volunteer. So that was exciting in and of itself. And I really liked how the NPCA provides a lot of resources. I mean, I was new to this, but I looked around the website and looked at the resource documents. And for me, what struck me was that in Nevada, there wasn't a lot of advocacy efforts going on. And so I thought, well, there's somewhere I can step in and try to help. And as an evacuated RPCV, I also wanted to get to know other RPCVs in the state. And I feel like there are a few better ways to meet people than saying, hey, I want to help people. Can you help me help people? So I really liked how, combined with the NPCA resources, these types of trainings, I was able to quickly get up to speed on how do these tend to work, and then Googling what are the congressmen's or congresswomen what are their sites, how do I schedule a meeting. Luckily, one of my high school friends had interned for my representative staff, so I was able to also contact her and say, hey, can you get us a meeting? And that was the fastest meeting we could get scheduled. So definitely considering who you already know can really help, even if you're just getting started, because those people knew people who knew people to help get things moving right along.
Now, one of the reasons we scheduled our days of advocacy through the month of March and through the month of April is because sometimes it does take a while to get a meeting scheduled. And so I guess people shouldn't get discouraged if they don't get an immediate response. But one thing I wanted to ask you both is, and then the question of building your team. How did you go about finding other constituents to join you for the meeting? And so Kirsty, you started to talk about the other affiliate group that you brought in. Any other ways that you built other constituents into the meetings?
Yeah, so I did want to give a plug for Jonathan, and because Jonathan, I think reached out, or I'm not sure who reached out first, but I know the Central Missouri Advocacy Coordinator talked to Jonathan, and Jonathan put him in touch with me, and then we got the St. Louis group involved as well. So don't overlook the power of the NPCA in helping you find other people to get involved with these meetings. And then once I got the folks from these affiliate groups with the Missouri meeting, I had to get folks from my own group. And it does help if you're part of an affiliate group, because that's a whole network. And I use the affiliate works or affiliate groups Facebook group and newsletter and all the events I would speak about advocacy. In fact, we just had our open house last Saturday, and at the open house, I spoke about advocacy. So, it helps if you use already in place methods of promotion. And then once you, what I particularly do is I kind of look at my schedule and I put out, once I coordinate with the folks on the legislative side, I put that date out and I just say, here's the event. And, whoever can make it, I just post it, because I basically have to do it around my schedule because it's so busy. And that's, I put the Facebook event out and, people sign up, but I've been promoting it all along.
Daniel, does that sound kind of familiar, or same circumstance for you, or?
Sounds very familiar, especially because I wasn't as connected to people as I got evacuated. So being able to connect with people who had email lists of other RPCVs allowed them to get my name out there as someone who's trying to find people who would be interested in the advocacy meetings. And then another thing that helped me was just scrolling through LinkedIn. I'd noticed other classmates of mine from university who joined the Peace Corps, got evacuated. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, does this sound like something up your alley? And especially what was helpful to me was letting people know that I was open to connecting with more people, because at first I was able to get about a half dozen people through those initial emailing people to let them know I exist. But then as the weeks went on, some people would email me saying, oh, so-and-so mentioned you and let's connect. And so by the end of those initial weeks of reaching out, I had about a dozen people on my email list. And so when a constituent meeting was getting scheduled, I could let them all know and then get a handful who could be available for those. And virtual really helps with that.
Well, one thing I want to mention, that because it was raised, we will at NPCA, we will try to help people connect, as was noted. The one thing we are cognizant of, and I know this is frustrating for some of our folks, understandably, is we do want to be respectful of privacy issues for members of our community. So the way we try to do this, if somebody in our audience is interested in organizing a meeting but isn't sure who to connect with, if they get an item posted up on our board, we will look to that congressional district and reach out from our end to people so that they can connect with the organizer. So as opposed to, we unfortunately can't just share those names of those people. But once somebody does connect with you, and as you pointed out, Daniel, once somebody connects with you, then you're building your base of advocates for the future. We've got time for maybe, let me just actually go to Hadia, one of our fantastic interns. Hadia, are there any questions in the chat at this point?
No, I do not see any in the chat right now.
Okay, great. We will have a Q&A at the end of the meeting when we formally end, if there's other questions people want to go back to. My last question is, since it is virtual, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes here. I would suggest it's especially important for you to hold a preparatory meeting ahead of your actual meeting. Is that the case? And would you agree with that? And how do you go about doing that? Daniel, let's start with you this time.
So for me, what I do is I look at when's the date of our advocacy meeting, and then I try to schedule out about a day or two ahead of that with whomever's going to be in the call. And so what we try to do is I take the documents that we have, the NPCA resources, forward those to everyone who will be involved with it, and then try to chat with them kind of like this on a call, explain out what are the key points, what are the key issues. And what's really helpful for me, because I don't know a lot of these people personally, is we also have a chance to get to know each other, get to know which issues we're passionate about. Because here I am, a Peace Corps volunteer who just became an RPCV a year ago, but there's people who've been RPCVs for dozens of years, and they have a lot of stories that they can tell that I simply don't know about. So these calls are really helpful for revealing some really great things that we can bring up when we get to our prep calls and when we get to the advocacy calls. And even if not everyone can get on the prep call, I'll do a summary email to everybody so that people don't miss any information before we get to the main call. And this is how we set our agenda before we get to the big meeting.
Great. And Kirsty, you got about a minute. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say when I had worked with the other affiliate groups, I met with them first, kind of a pre-meeting to make sure that we all were on the same page, and we, kind of hashed out who was going to take the meatier parts of the meetings, like the legislative parts. And then I had another meeting with everyone else who where we did similar things. We got the agenda formalized, kind of met, eased people's concerns, talked about the issues, but really just assigned roles and got everybody to know that this is what our agenda was, and so they'd feel comfortable about it. But I don't assign any really meaty legislative roles to newcomers. I don't want to scare them off.
Well, thank you both for your time this evening and sharing your thoughts. This is really wonderful, and we really appreciate all you do for the Peace Corps community in your respective states. We're going to move on, everyone, to the next section, which is making the case, key advocacy issues and talking points. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Miriam Foote. Miriam?
Thank you, Jonathan. So we're going to get started with the next panel that we have ready here as I make the others join me. So first off, I will introduce myself. My name is Miriam Foote. I'm working with Jonathan on advocacy, and I wanted to introduce both Joel Rubin and Tim Garvin. If you both would be able to take a second to introduce yourselves, that'd be great, starting with Joel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Rubin, and I am a government relations consultant to NPCA now, but my background is significantly tied to Capitol Hill and work here in Washington. I served in the Senate and as a foreign policy advisor, and I also was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs in the Obama administration, working with the House. Most important to tonight, though, I'm an RPCV from Costa Rica, 1994 to 96.
Great. And Tim, would you also introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Fabulous to be here. I am so thrilled and proud that you're all joining us. Like Joel said, I too, my wife and I joined the Peace Corps on our one-year wedding anniversary. We served in Jamaica in 91 and 92. And ever since I've been out, I've been working in the nonprofit sector. For the last 15 years, I've been running a community organization, the United Way of Central Massachusetts. And in my work, I'm usually in Washington about 7 or 8 times a year, advocating on the Hill for some issue that we're fighting for.
Thank you. So to start off, I kind of want to ask you both a question. What are your experiences with advocacy, and kind of give us a little bit of background before we jump into some of the other meatier questions?
Well, I'll tell you, actually, my first ever experience doing advocacy was through the NPCA. I don't think I even mentioned this today in our prep call, but it was in June of 2002. way back in the day, and it was brilliant. It's what in many ways excited me about moving into congressional work and Capitol Hill and political advocacy for my career. And you all are the most valuable resource that a congressional office knows. You are a voter, you are a constituent, you are what they live for and what they listen to. So you're going in from a position of value to these offices, and you're also bringing value in terms of what you do for us as a community, clearly, and really living the third goal. So advocacy is great. It's a way to really communicate your personal passion and what you want to see happen in our world, and communicate it directly to people who can make decisions on behalf of all of us and how our country does its work with the Peace Corps.
Thanks, Joel. And Tim?
Sure. Joel, that's absolutely fabulous. And I love hearing that you started advocating for National Peace Corps Association. Advocacy is also fun. And the best definition I ever heard of it is giving voice for people that don't have voice. And I think that's really true. And as much as I love going down to Washington every March, except for this year, for the National Peace Corps Association, probably the most fun I ever had, we got legislation in my state of Massachusetts that gave us about 4 acres of land in Boston to us to use to build a recreational facility, and to have land transferred through a legislative process and signed by the governor, and then you hold the deed to the land that you just had, is just absolutely fabulous. And exactly like Joel said, your passion, your stories, your voice, and that you're a constituent, you are the most powerful person that you could possibly be. And I am thrilled that you're all here.
Thank you. So now, as we kind of start building, or we start thinking about talking points and things that we should be bringing up in the meetings, I wanted to ask the both of you, what are some key asks that we should be making this year? How should we be also choosing those key asks when we go into these meetings? How should we frame those? So starting with Joel, could you give us an answer?
Happy to do it, Miriam. And Tim, your passion is coming right through, and I love it. I want to sort of communicate first and foremost, you as advocates, as grassroots advocates, you're not operating in a vacuum. You're not going up there independently on your own, without any backup, without any context, without any support. And so what you'll see in the materials that Jonathan is sharing with you are materials that are honed to help you communicate in a way that integrates with the NPCA's ongoing advocacy efforts that Jonathan is leading and that Miriam is a core part of. What that means then is that you're filling in a critical role of making the ask, which is, it's simple in its declaration, an ask, but you're making that ask into a human ask, into something that is going to help the staffer and or the member feel something, make a connection with them. That's the real key thing. And we can get into technicals, and I can go over a couple of quick points as well. But what you're doing is you're being yourself, and you're making that connection real, and you're filling in that connect so that when all is done and you're gone and you're back home, and the NPCA is continuing to work with these offices and maintain these relationships, that staffer and or member will have a positive feeling about the Peace Corps because of your exposure to them and you're talking to them. Now the asks, there are a few key asks, and if you want, Miriam, I can sort of go over them point by point if that works for you. It'd be very, very simple, very top line. But these asks are designed by NPCA because they fit into a strategy that NPCA is executing, and so you're putting in the constituent emotional support that these asks need. It brings them to life. The first one, and you'll see on the document that you get, is the money ask, which is the primary objective of these meetings, which is to ensure that Peace Corps budget is robust. And this year, we're asking that you request for at least $450 million for Peace Corps' activities in the coming fiscal year, which is 2022. The second is that you're going to ask them to sign on to a Dear Colleague letter. Now, first of all, the first one, that's a top line request. Technically, then member offices can go to the Appropriations Committee and say to those committee members who manage the money, we want this level of funding for Peace Corps. So that's sort of how they do it internally in Congress. Second is a Dear Colleague letter, which will be one for the House and one for the Senate. And you will ask that that member sign on to a Dear Colleague letter, which is essentially a letter drafted by a couple of members and then sent around, Dear Colleague, to the colleagues of those respective chambers so they can all sign on to that as well. And that letter will be circulated in the House and in the Senate as well. And it will essentially say the same thing about robust funding. And so whomever you're meeting with, you want their member to sign on to that letter. And then the third, one for each chamber. There are two separate bills moving right now, one in the House, which is the HR 1456, which simply put is, we can call it the Garamendi bill, the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act of 2021. And in the Senate, there's a bill on healthcare and post-COVID-19. And that is the primary bill right now in the Senate. And what you would do is, as well, you ask these members, these offices, to co-sponsor those bills, which by their nature, they're introduced and then they just sit. And people get, basically bills are alive, but they don't really get blood flowing through the veins until you start seeing members of Congress signing on to them. So you're injecting energy and life into those bills when the members who you're meeting with co-sponsor it or sign on to it. That shows that there's political support. That shows that it is important. And that's what helps it begin to move through the process, hopefully towards a law.
Thanks, Joel and Tim. What should we be thinking about as we're crafting these key talking points?
Thank you. First of all, it is so great to work with Joel, and I hope all of you have the opportunity, as I do right now, because he is an expert both from the inside and from the outside. Joel, thank you. The only two things I would add. The first is every single member of Congress, every single one, has returned Peace Corps volunteers living in their district. So you are asking them to support what you believe in. And the second, this is the ultimate, the epitome of playing it forward. The reason so many of us were able to serve in the Peace Corps is because other people, 10 years or 20 years, or maybe only 2 years, did exactly what we're doing right now. And we want there to be another 60 years of Peace Corps, and we want to get to 10,000 people every year so that this, in fact, is the best institution of compassion in America.
Thank you. So now we're going to have a little activity where we're going to do a little kind of playing around with Joel and Tim kind of being our PCV representatives, and I am a staffer. This is scary. So if you guys want to get started, we're going to kind of show you an example of how a meeting could happen, what kind of questions you might be receiving, and kind of the way to concisely as well kind of give a lot of these ideas in a way that staffers or people that you're speaking with will be able to understand it. And so I will be playing staffer.
Actually, we're going to have you play Congresswoman Foote. That's what we want. And
I am a congresswoman.
Joel, Madam Congressman, it's great to see you again. Congratulations on your reelection. I was proud to vote for you in my district, in your district. And as you know, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. My colleague Joel, he and I are here today because we're going to set up a very clear agenda. We want to ask for your support very clearly, and Joel will outline what we're asking for. We want to tell you a little bit about why the Peace Corps is so important. We're going to share a little bit about what we did when we were serving in the Peace Corps and what we do now, and how Peace Corps service shaped and influenced us into the Americans that we are. And then we will answer any questions you might have. So Joel, my good colleague, what are we asking for?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Tim and Congresswoman. As you see by Tim's presentation, we're passionate about the Peace Corps. We're passionate because the Peace Corps gave us an experience that not only enabled us to grow and contribute, but also built the positive footprint of the United States around the world. And we have learned from that experience and want to bring that back home to you right now. But want you to understand how important it is for the United States to ensure that we have a strong Peace Corps that helps us, especially after the pandemic. Get back out, get the people of America out. We are the American people's face to the world as Peace Corps volunteers, and we believe that you support that vision of being in partnership, and your role in making sure it happens is critical. So we have several key asks to do that. First and foremost, the budget is primary. The budget has to be robust, and this year we're asking for $450 million. In the last 6 years, it's been flat at $410 million, and that's been for roughly 7,300 volunteers in the previous year before all volunteers were withdrawn. That's not enough right now. With additional reforms that are needed, with resending volunteers out to the field, we believe that $450 million needs to be the baseline to get a robust program up and running as soon as possible once the Peace Corps says it's time to serve. Now, to get back out and serve. Now, to do that, we not only think that you need to, and we hope that you sign Dear Colleague letters that will be coming around. There's also a critical bill. John Garamendi and Garrett Graves have co-authored the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act, HR 1456. We really believe that your support for that by co-sponsoring it will help create a political environment that shapes the future of the Peace Corps for the better, that gives energy to it to move through the Congress and really add the kinds of reforms for the Peace Corps that many of our members in the community have been asking for to make a robust Peace Corps going forward. So we thank you and hope that you'll consider doing these, making these requests become a reality.
Thank you very much for meeting with me. I was able to read some of the information you had passed along to me ahead of time. The big question that I have though is why 460 million? And over 4 years, there'll be an increase in 600 million. Why the big jump, especially now during COVID? Why would this be a priority? This seems like a very big number. So would you be able to talk to me a little bit more about the rationale for the big jump?
We welcome that question. In fact, we don't think that's a big jump. And Congresswoman, seeing what you've supported in the past, this is in fact part of our American response to COVID around the world. Why do we need to go to 450 or 460 this first year? Because we need to restart what we're doing and we need to operationalize so that we can get back to the same place we were 14 months ago when we had to evacuate for the first time in our 60 years, all Peace Corps volunteers and bring them back to the United States. And then why do we need to jump by $50 million each year? Which, if one thinks about it, and I just want to put this into context. In 2019, pre-pandemic times, Americans spent $490 million on Halloween costumes for their pets. All we want is that we have that same amount of capital to serve the world with first 7,500, then 8, then 9, and then 10,000 Americans in 131 countries around the world, exactly as Joel said, putting the best face on America and doing person-to-person diplomacy and person-to-person community development. In this last year, I have often thought some people ran away from the pandemic. We, in your district, we, the Peace Corps, we ran towards it. We all, in the United States and around the world, were saying, what can we do to help? And this will allow us to do that. Joel, I don't know if you would like to add in.
Well, Tim, the only thing I'd add, and I completely support everything you're saying. I think it's also important to understand that this is an investment for the United States as well. We have, over the course of the 60 years of Peace Corps' existence, contributed over 3 billion service hours. That is 3 billion hours of volunteer work on behalf of mankind from the investment in the Peace Corps. We are essentially a training ground for next generation of leaders here in our country. And there are about 250,000 Americans who have served in the Peace Corps. It's a constituency that is active in leadership throughout our country. And this is a time to connect and engage. Recently, Secretary of State Blinken stated that it was important for the United States to re-engage the world. That was a core foreign policy priority. Well, we don't do it from Zoom, as we know. We do it out in the field. And that means sending out our best, sending out our volunteers, and having them re-engage the world on behalf of our country.
Thank you. I think I will sign on to this.
Yeah, and you can join too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I just have one more. We have time for maybe 2 more questions. So Joel, I wanted to ask, as we were setting all of this up, could you kind of debrief us on some key concepts in terms of delivering these talking points? What are things that we need to be considering? How do we set the tone? And how do we really kind of deliver these ideas in a way that is really understandable to people who work on the Hill?
Yeah, thanks, Miriam. So I want to be really simple in this because I think what you want to make sure you're doing when you go into the meeting is not overthinking it, right? Just be simple, be yourself. Staff on the Hill, they tend to be quick. A lot of these people are very expert on the issues. They won't be patient. A lot of time, it doesn't mean they'll be rude, but that means, the opening 5, 6, 7 minutes of the opening session amongst our advocate, amongst the advocates, that's a lot, that's plenty. And then let them ask questions, be comfortable with a pause. They'll really want to understand things. So there are 3 frames, real quick, I'll say, and then I'll defer to Tim. First thing is when you open up and you decide who's going to sort of lead the meeting, maybe a little gentle coordinator. Everyone should go around and say who they are, say why they're there, what matter, why they're doing this, but maybe 60 seconds worth at most, at the high end. Show yourself at the high end, but I'd say 60 seconds of who I am, why I'm here, why the Peace Corps matters, why I care so much to be telling you that you need to support it. The second one is there are a lot of talking points that you'll see in this memo. They're great. You don't have to say all of them. You're not required to go to all 10. Find one that you like, that resonates with you. That's it. That's your talking point. I happen to like our national security advanced by the Peace Corps, so that's what I use. Someone else, may find the road to 10,000 more inspiring. One key point, that's it. Get that across, and then you'll be great. And of course, always do have in the back of your mind the ask, because even if one person may request it, you can always, you're all smart people, you can also say, yeah, that's why you need to sign on to that bill. We need it. We need your support. Yeah, that's why you need to sign that, dear colleague, and that money will make a difference. So those are the 3 frames. Show yourself briefly, find just that one key talking point that speaks to you, and then continue to wrap it towards the ask, in the conversation as well. Tim, it's all you. I love this stuff. No, you love this stuff. Tim is great. NPCA is genius at this. The citizen, you are doing the work of the 3rd goal. I got to say it. The 3rd goal, bringing the Peace Corps back home. There's no greater mitzvah. I'm Jewish, so I'll say it, right? There's no greater mitzvah than bringing it back home and inspiring people here at home in our Congress to advance the Peace Corps. That is the living embodiment of the 3rd goal. So I just think, show your passion and they'll love you.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you, Tim. We are at the time. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, I want to introduce Athena Fouele and Lori Halvorsen, who will be joining us to talk about this panel on how to hold an effective advocacy meeting. So starting with Athena, would you like to introduce yourself to our community?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet other RPCVs, and it's a pleasure to be able to continue to contribute to this 3rd goal work that we're doing in perpetuating both interest and funding for all things related to the Peace Corps. As the slide says, my name is Athena Fouele. I was a Peace Corps volunteer to Uzbekistan in 1999 to 2001. So shout out over there to Christy, who was in Kazakhstan, I hear, give or take around the same time as I was. I've lived in Washington, D.C. now for about 18 years, and I've been going to the Hill for about 10 of those years. And a few years ago, I met up with Jonathan and leadership over at NPCA, who do a fantastic job. I can echo the words that Joel and Tim have been preparing. Like, you are so well prepared, or the materials have been so well put together for you to go in there and have fantastic conversations with all of your electeds. But I won't go too far down that hole unless Lori wanted to do a quick introduction, but good to see you all.
Yes, Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, definitely. Thank you. So excited to be here with y'all. And I apologize for my tardiness, but I'm so glad I was able to make it on. My name is Lori Halvorsen. I'm an RPCV from Burkina Faso, 07 to 09. And I was a health volunteer. And now, as it says, I live in Louisiana. I work in the nonprofit sector as well within an AmeriCorps program called City Year. And I've been doing advocacy coordinator work for 2 years. I'm not quite sure, to be honest, but we've had some pretty great meetings here in Baton Rouge, and excited to share a little bit more about that. And just want to echo what Athena said before about all the amazing resources that are at all of your fingertips. So excited to share a little more about that too.
Thank you. So I'll ask both of you these questions, but starting with Athena, how do you prepare for your meetings? How have you prepared? What are some tips that you can give to people when they're preparing for their meetings? What should they be doing right now? And how should they go about that?
Great. So yes, thank you. The first is absolutely read everything you can, right? I think as Peace Corps volunteers, generally speaking, we're very curious and group that likes to stay informed. So all of the information that has been provided for you are fantastic resources. Definitely read what you're able to do. That said, understand that come the moment of your meeting, the training that was done earlier was fantastic. Don't be, a couple of things I've noted is don't be disappointed if the meeting runs short, right? So these people on the Hill are extremely busy. If you were doing this in person, you might have been meeting in the hallway kind of a situation. So keep in mind that some of those most effective meetings tend to be on the shorter end. So that's one. I guess don't be so put off if for some reason you feel that you're not getting your this sort of FaceTime, this Mr. Smith goes to Washington kind of experience, right? Two, I would say that keep it relevant to your district. So we've heard some fantastic points about ways that this is going to impact American public diplomacy and citizen to citizen diplomacy that happens in the world. All of that is fantastic. And you're coming from a place of authenticity when talking about that, given your experiences. But something I would add to that list is talk about how what you're doing has now impacted your community back home. So how has your understanding of Burkina Faso, Uzbekistan, or wherever you served impacting your family's lives, your friends' lives, your community's lives, where you're working now? In any way that you can tie that piece into the story would be critical, because they want to see, I know a lot of us would love to talk about the time that they were abroad and how impactful that was for the country that you were in. Also a very important piece of that. But as district representatives here in the United States, they're going to want to see, which is why those state one pages are fantastic for this. They're going to want to see the return of investment into American communities, into the American experiences. So I would urge you all to take a moment to think about how you can again make it relevant to your current work, to your current life, to your current situation. Continue to make it personal and firsthand. These are the talking points are good. So consider the talking points kind of like the bones of what you are, the message that you're trying to get across, by putting some meat and spin around it with your own personal experiences while you are on your Peace Corps experience time. And lastly, this is kind of like a pro tip. Always be gracious, always be thankful. If you can send a quick email afterwards, if you are on social media, hit them on Twitter with just like a quick thank you. So fantastic. It was a fantastic opportunity speaking with Congresswoman Foote this afternoon. So happy to hear her support S32 if she's in the Senate, but she's in the House. So happy that she's there to support HR 1456, 1459, 1456. And we look forward to continued support for Peace Corps in the coming years, kind of things. Just a quick message like that. Chances are you'll get a retweet. Chances are you'll get a like, but at the very least, it's a good way to acknowledge publicly that they took the meeting and that they're in support of it, and they're going to love that. They're going to eat that up. If again we were in person, taking pictures with the staffer, taking pictures in front of the door with the flags and the signs to retweet and post on social would also be very well received. And Jonathan, on that point, or Miriam, I'm sorry, is there a hashtag you would like folks to use? I would also include that at some point. That might have been in the materials if so, but yeah, that would probably be the summation of what I'd have to share. So thanks.
Thank you. We should have a hashtag, Jonathan. Lori, do you have any ideas as well for preparing for these meetings and how you've prepared for them in the past? Can you share that? Any tips and tricks you have as well?
Definitely, yeah. First of all, definitely just double clicking on everything Athena said. She definitely nailed it, and I wholeheartedly agree. A couple things I would add. Just a reiteration, Athena said it, read things, get familiar with the legislation. If you're like me, like this is not a world in which I'm like super familiar, you know, I'm not super into politics and all the terms and stuff. It's not second nature to me. But when it comes to these meetings, I do my homework. So at least when I'm walking into that meeting, I am super familiar with the legislation we want to talk about, because they will throw out, you know, numbers, HR, whatever, this, that, terms. And so it's really good to be familiar. So you're not kind of going, yeah, that one's great, we support it, you know, like really get familiar. So it, you know, it takes a little homework, but you're just gonna be that much more prepared for the meeting. To that end, my second recommendation would be to absolutely have a set agenda, create it in advance, share it with the office with whom you're meeting. Oftentimes they're also gonna request that you share who is going to be there, especially if it's in person. So make sure that you're planning all this out in advance, right? Make sure you're reaching out to your other RPCVs in the area, setting a firm deadline of when you need to know who's going to be joining you, because they're going to ask those questions and you want to be able to tell them everybody's name. And then what I also try to do, which I highly recommend, is have a prep meeting with your fellow RPCVs or whomever is going to be joining you. It's actually easier in the virtual world because it's a little easier to coordinate schedules. We have a meeting coming up on the 24th, and we're trying to coordinate time to sit together online next week just to prepare. That way you're also giving everyone a chance to kind of share like how involved they want to be. Some of your fellow RPCVs might be like, I don't want to say anything, I'm just here for support. Others might want to be more involved, so you can really nail out those details ahead of time. And then the last thing I'll say kind of contradicts what I just said, but the other thing I'd share is be prepared and be open to the meeting going whatever direction it will go, right? You may come in with this hardcore agenda and you want to talk about X and Y and Z, but like Athena mentioned, it may be quicker than you thought. It may start later than you thought. It may be a walking meeting as opposed to a sit down. You may end up not speaking with the legislator themselves. So just be really open and, you know that any kind of face time you're getting is positive, right? Anytime that you have a chance to share and talk and with whomever in that office, it's going to be a win. So don't get tripped up if they start talking about something else, you know, or go off on a tangent about how they wanted to be in the Peace Corps, but they never got a chance because they had to do this, but their, you know, chief of staff is applying, you know, you just roll with it, right? Because any of those conversations are gonna, they're gonna be something that's remembered. So be prepared, but be open too.
Can I, yeah, thank you, Lori. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. This, what we've talked about a lot this evening has been, you know, talking points, and we have statistics and all of that. That is very good, and that'll, being informed and educated in these discussions will absolutely be in your favor. But at the same time, none of you are, well, I don't know, but most of you are probably not lobbyists, right? So you're coming in there as a constituent, act like a constituent, talk about your personal firsthand experiences, and that will come across in those discussions, because these people are taking 8 to 10 meetings a day similar to this, right? So I search them on LinkedIn to see who staffer I'm going to talk to, if they studied abroad, if they have like any kind of international experience. Take a look at the member of Congress to see if there's a region of the world that they're particularly passionate about or recently traveled with, to make that kind of small talk introductions a way to segue into the larger discussion at hand. And I've been seeing some chatter back and forth about just how do you cross that sort of bipartisan line? To the question and the role play that was happening earlier, a response to something like that would be me like, how can we fund this when there are so many other priorities? My response to that would be, how can you not fund this? This is an investment in your citizens. This is an investment in the workforce development of your constituents, of your state, of your city, of your region. So in many ways, yes, this is an investment not only in our own citizenry, but it's also a long-term investment in national security for all of those reasons that the talking points spell out. So I would leave it at that, because you're right, it can get a little hairy going into too much detail about which side wants to do what. So just keep it about, again, your own personal, this is what happened to me, and this is why I think you should provide this opportunity for more people in our state and city. and region.
And just to add, I think in what you said, Athena, it's about the preparation too. So like if you know you're going in and it's someone who's maybe on like the conservative side or whatever, getting to know what they're invested in, what's important to them, what they support, and trying to find a way to connect that, right? I mean, we've all said it, like NPCA, Jonathan and his team have great resources. So if you go in knowing like this person doesn't support X, Y, and Z, but they're really into this, figure out how to tie it in, like work with the team and try to figure out what you can appeal to that might be more amenable to them.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I have one more question, since this will probably be the last question, but could you talk about more? You've already kind of both hit on this, but more of the challenges that you've had in some of your meetings and what maybe first time, advocacy RPCVs or people who really care about Peace Corps can expect. We've received a lot of feedback from RPCVs as well who are worried about different aspects of kind of talking to representatives and staff. So if you could just share with us how you recommend volunteers and others kind of getting around this and some of the challenges that they can expect when talking as well.
Lori, did you want to go first or should I hop in? So I would just manage this expectation that, well, first I would start by what you're doing is critical to the functioning of our democracy, right? If we are a representative democracy, the elected officials need to hear from their constituents early and often. So anything you can do to continue to be participating in this kind of work is important. That said, like these meetings can go short, they can go long, but I think it's important to understand that it's a process. And if you can get in a little bit about how it's important to you, how it's important to your city, district, region, and say those 3 asks, which the summary was 450 minimum for the budget, S32 or HR 1456 sign-ons, then that's good. You have accomplished what you've intended to do. So understand that this is a much larger process that Jonathan, Miriam, and their team is working on throughout the year. But this is a great opportunity for us to make a big splash in one moment in time. But understand that this is something that has to happen as part of the process of our working. So don't lose heart if you don't feel, oh, I forgot to tell that one story, or like, oh, I didn't get that one point in. That's okay, because then you can always send your thank you, you can send your follow-up. And to that point, yes, it's important to be briefed so that you know and feel comfortable with the information, but you can always say, I'm not sure, let me get back to you as well. Never feel like don't throw out numbers or statistics or data that you're not sure about. Say, you know what, I'm not sure I have that fact straight. So let me and the team get back to you on that. And you always can. So again, go in there, tell your story, and you'll be successful.
Thank you. And Lori?
Yeah, I mean, I think Athena nailed it in terms of just like expectations and like not being too hard on yourself. I'll be really honest. The congressman with whom we've met mostly is just a big fan of the Peace Corps, so we haven't really encountered any major challenges. I continue to be honest. He's done some things recently that are a little hard to swallow for me personally and several of my RPCVs. So I think future meetings might be a little more challenging. So ask me again in a year. But I think it's just like Athena said, like, don't feel disappointed. Don't feel like you didn't work hard. I mean, some of our less Peace Corps friendly legislators, they just don't schedule meetings, and you don't want to take that personally if you keep getting rejection. You just keep trying, right? And just know that every step you're taking is doing something, right? Even if even if they don't walk out being like, I'm going to fund everything and I'm quitting my job to join the Peace Corps tomorrow, like you have to be reasonable in your expectations of what's going to come of these meetings. And know that like everything you're doing is productive and super helpful.
Thank you, Lori. So we've reached the time that we have for this panel, and I want to thank you both as well for joining us and sharing these really important experiences that I'm sure will help so many people in terms of kind of, visualizing, preparing this as well as executing it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Miriam and Laurie and Athena. Really appreciate your hard work for the Peace Corps community. We've come to the close of the formal part of this evening. I'm going to make one last attempt to get to the screen to show you just quickly where you can find the resources I was referencing. While I try to do that, people might want to be putting additional questions about any of the topics into the chat, and we can get to those shortly. Now, give me just a moment here. I'm gonna, oh my goodness, there we go. That's gonna do it. Okay. All right, so now let me go back here, folks. I think we've got it now. I'm gonna share my screen again. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you can see what I've got on the screen. Picture of the Capitol, yes, Joel, thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, great. So everybody, this is our website, peacecorpsconnect.org. And what you would want to do is go to the touch points up here, and this is the one where it says news. And if you click on news, you'll get a listing of our news feeds that are updated on a regular basis. Right now, this is the second one in the queue. It says Days of Advocacy are here. And as I said, this is the area where we're putting a lot of the resources that we've referenced. So I'm just going to show one quick thing here. I'll just give you a quick summary. So we talked about our kickoff back in March. Then we talk about how you can take an individual action right now. I'm going to go to that because we haven't talked about this tonight. So we have an electronic click to send opportunity. So anybody, not just RPCVs, not just you, friends, family, anybody can voice their support for the Peace Corps with a quick click of their computer pad and send messages to their senators or House members about these bills that we've been talking about tonight. Last year, we generated about 20,000, between 20 and 25,000 messages through this system. Really want to see that get higher and higher. And we're going to try to set an ambitious goal, but this is the time over the next 2 months to really let this fly. And we'll be continuing to update this. For evacuees, we have an action for those that may want to continue their service, an action, a generic action in a sense, where you can tell your members of Congress that you want to go back, you're ready to serve again. So that is one of the things that is in this list. Then I'm going to show you this page is a lot of what we talked about. This is kind of our go-to page for planning Days of Advocacy events over the next 6 weeks. So we've got an outline here, and then we talked about this some, how do you organize a meeting? So these are some of the things you would have heard from the first panel. This is our current map of where activity is happening. And so again, just to note, the blue dots mean that someone is planning to do something in that particular area. And we have contact information listed there, but there hasn't been a set date yet. If you click on one of the yellow dots, that indicates that a date has been set, but it's in the future. And the red dots are indicating that something now has already been held. And we want to continue to populate that map. And then if you go down further here, as the last panel was talking about, what are some key things to a successful meeting? So some good resources there if you're kind of a first timer to this. And then the state resources page, this is the last thing. Well, I'll quickly show you, I mentioned this 2-page generic document. So this is a 2-page generic document that you can use for any of your meetings. This cites some of this polling data that is very positive. I mentioned some great quotes from the ambassador to Colombia and our good friend Kul Gautam from Nepal, and then trying to again outline some of the key items of the importance of Peace Corps. And then last thing I'm going to show you for now, but I will copy the link so you can see, and I will put this in the chat so you can refer to it. But the last thing is the state resources page. And I'm going to click on that, and we'll look at, let's see if it's churning away here. It'll be with us in a second, we hope. But this has the information when I was talking about state-specific information about your representatives in Congress. So I'm just going to go down to California. So for example, if you click on California and the Peace Corps summary, you get a one-page document which you can download, and you can send this to your members in advance of or after. And you can see here are the Peace Corps numbers for California, how many evacuated, how many since 1961, 5 things to know about the California Peace Corps community. So we've got a document like this for every state and also for the District of Columbia. And then lastly, just look at the state delegation here, or the congressional delegation. So for every senator, here's Dianne Feinstein, big Peace Corps supporter, and has been a champion of our Dear Colleague letters in the Senate. Look at all the times that the Peace Corps community has met with her office over the years. Here's the staff person that handles, there it is, Rachel Bombach handles foreign policy issues for the senator. What are the committee assignments? And then on the backside, what are the actions? And so again, she's been the co-author of the Peace Corps funding Dear Colleague letter since 2012. And she signed the letter consistently before that, an original co-sponsor of the S-32, one of the bills. She's already an original co-sponsor of that, and so on and so forth. And similar for the members of the House of Representatives for each of your respective states. So again, those are just some of the resources, and I'm going to put the chat in there, and I'm going to ask Cecina and Hadia, are there any questions coming up on the, so we're going to move everybody into question and answer mode. We'll try to stick around to answer all and any questions. You're welcome to break off now if you wish to, but Cecina, Hadia, any questions popping up in the chat line?
Yeah, there's been a couple questions. I think they were directed toward Joel and Tim, if they wanted to answer these. The first one is from Keith Miller asking, has the Senate bill been introduced, and will we want to set up meetings with our 2 senators, or is it just focused on House members?
Well, the quick answer is we should set up meetings with every single member of Congress. And as much as we're focused on the House because of Congressman Garamendi and HR 1456, we certainly want to have both of our senators from every one of our states supporting Peace Corps.
Yeah, and to jump on that, one never knows where things will head. And the exciting part about the House bill is that once people are advocating for it, it's like its own little community, Capitol Hill, and the word will get out, and people are watching. People in the Senate know that the bill was introduced in the House. So the more that there's energy and enthusiasm with senators about Peace Corps, even if there's not a particular legislation or vehicle at that moment, it doesn't mean there won't be. So you're prepping the ground and helping to get the energy level high for a potential bill.
Thank you both. The second question comes from Zinta asking, I guess more generally, will these slides be available, or are there slides for talking points?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Cecina?
It's just asked, are there slides for the talking points? Talking points are described about, I think what Joel and Tim were talking about earlier.
We don't have slides, but we have in the link that I just put in the chat. If you go to that, chat, at the bottom of the news item, you will see outlines. It'll say Peace Corps funding, and then it will say comprehensive Peace Corps legislation, and then it will refer to the third bill dealing with COVID and jobs. And in each of those sections, there is a link attached to a PDF document that outline the talking points. So I will note we view those as being kind of internal documents. not to be, certainly to be shared with the other people you're working on, but those are for you to prepare for. But we won't have those in slide format, but again, they really are for you to use. You're welcome to download those and share those with other members of your team.
Thank you. Mary Broad asks, I think a couple times was brought up. It was answered by someone in the chat, but I just want to give anyone else a chance to answer this. When Googling HR 1456, earlier bills with that number first come up, what can be done to get the gerrymandy bill on top? Or gerrymandy bill on top, my apologies.
So technically, it's not up yet on the GPO, on the government printing office site. So it's just not up to us, unfortunately. So all you have in the Congress website, congress.gov, is a top line description of it. They're just behind the 8 ball on that. But we have the PDF, right, Jonathan? I mean, there's the PDF of that, and so stay tuned, Tim.
Yeah, and where you can find that now, Mary, or anyone. So the place I was describing, where you have the reference to the Peace Corps Comprehensive Bill on that news site, there is a link to a press release that Congressman Garamendi released. And within that press release, there is another link to the bill itself. Now it was a draft, not a draft of the bill, it was the final bill. It did not have the number yet. So when you see it at the very top, it's going to say HR, and then it's going to be blank. So you will not see 1456 there. But the text of the bill is the text of the legislation. And to what Joel said, we imagine that that's going to be cleared up relatively soon, where they get that bill posted on the government site.
And then it will jump to the top of the queue on the websites.
Yeah, my concern is that a lot of, even in the congressional offices, they're probably a lot like me. We go to Google as our default. And what we find on the top of the Google, put in HR 1456, and first you learn about a marijuana bill from a couple years ago. And then below that are several articles about shark fin or something like that, shark fins. And so it's like on page 2 that you get to something related to this. And I'm just saying that's kind of bad form. Is there any way to get this 1456 search at the top of the search list and not marijuana?
So I'm sorry, maybe I didn't say it in the right way, but that's really up to Congress and the government printing office to take that bill and convert it into a full bill, as what Jonathan says, where it has the HR 1456 at the top of the PDF, and it's fully embedded in the Congress.gov website, which is the official portal for public visibility into legislative action. So
well, how do we get it to Google? It's the Google part. It's the search.
That won't happen until the government printing office gets their work completed in uploading that into the system. So you're right. I mean, it's fair, but we're totally dependent upon the official structures pushing that into the system. And Garamendi's people, I'm sure that you could Google it and you could add the word Garamendi and you'll find it if you add another keynote.
Yeah, another thing you can do, and I've done this, so you go to congress.gov and then they have a search at the top. And what you can do, and you will see the bill then, is if you type in there Peace Corps and you put Peace Corps in quotations, then you're going to see, it'll show up. But when you go, just so you know, right now, if you go there and you click for the text of the bill, it says this has not been posted yet. In essence, come back later. The place, if you want to physically share the bill with the members, is by going to the link that I put in and going to Congressman Garamendi's press release. So and that'll change, but that's out, as Joel said, that's out of our hands.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, that's good to know. That's out of our
no,
hands.
It's annoying. It's
like, that's really amazing. So if one of our asks is to get somebody to be a co-sponsor on that bill, is it too premature for them to even say they're a co-sponsor? To even sign up to be a co-sponsor?
No, they'll know about it.
Mary, we've already been asking people to co-sponsor it. We started on on March 1st. And I actually think this gives a great opportunity, following what Jonathan said. If you do have any meetings coming up in the next 2 weeks and it's not yet up on the government website, you have access to that bill and say, I would be glad to send you a copy of the bill. And all of a sudden you're providing them something that they don't have.
Okay. But they can sign up to be a co-sponsor at any time.
Yeah, all they have to do that technically is contact Garamendi's office and say, please add us to the bill if they're a Democrat, and they can still do it as a Republican, but they may also want to go to Graves' office and say, please have us added to the bill. And then technically the office will then take that name, and after they gather enough names, they then take that to the cloakroom, they call it, or basically the official place in the House chamber to add those names to the list.
Thank you, good, thank you. Incredibly complex.
Cecina, other questions?
Government at work, sorry.
Or Hadia?
Yeah, I think I'll pass it to Hadia.
Yes, the next question, I believe Athena and Lori kind of mentioned in their segment, but someone is asking, how can we address members of Congress from different ideologies? So maybe if someone wants to expand on that a little bit.
Athena, how about you? I'm gonna pass
Sure.
the question to you.
I addressed a little bit of it already in the chat, but it's this idea that it's a slippery slope to get into like a tit for tat. Well, we supported this and you supported that, so I would definitely avoid that. But how I would address it is similar to what I alluded to, this idea that like the citizens of your district are not just Republican or Democrat. The citizens of your city, your district, your state, whatever meaning you're going into, is representative of all of that. And as an elected official for that whole community, you're only there to speak about yourself and the impact that the experience has had on you and your lives and your friends and your work and your experiences. And the importance of this kind of funding can't be overstated, because go back to the talking points, all of those reasons that this is an investment in our communities, this is an investment in our citizens, this is an investment in our national security. So that those types of things this is now an inner dialogue, the second part, all of that transcends the Republican Democrat divide. And so hopefully they'll understand and appreciate that you're talking as an American, you're not talking as a Republican or Democrat in that instance. But others, something to add to that? That's how I would probably address that. And it has happened where you come up and people are getting feisty. Everybody, we're a year into this global pandemic, but the people on the Hill are not. If you're meeting with your district, it could be different. But the folks at the national, they don't tend to get into these discussions that often. In my experience, it's been a handful of times where it's been, well, what should we cut then if we need to give you this money? Who should we take money from in order? Like, that's literally only happened once. They are really there to hear your stories. They're literally, hours of their day are committed to speaking with constituents. So take the stage, take your time, discuss the importance and value it's had in your life, and go from there. But yes, I don't think it needs to get down to a accusatory or she said, or what one does and what the other one doesn't. It doesn't need to get that. This is an idea that we're protecting the national security of the whole country. We are investing in all of our communities. We're investing in all of these things.
Can I just jump a little tiny add on Athena's brilliant points? Peace Corps has a great bipartisan tradition. It has been supported throughout the decades by both parties. Name dropping aside, Ronald Reagan was a big ally of it. Elaine Chao was a big advocate. I mean, there's a lot of reservoir of goodwill on Capitol Hill for it. And I think the key thing is you are a constituent. Like, those are all arguments that can be made inside DC ball. But going to Athena's point, as a constituent, as a voter from the district, you are the most important person to that member. And you can explain how it helps your community back home as well, and gives opportunities for people from the district. And I think making it really personal is a critical value add from the advocacy volunteers that you are, in terms of bringing the connection for the staffer who may be from the other side of the aisle into understanding why it matters and why it's a good thing. And that builds into the bipartisan excitement about the program.
And you're right. This idea that just if you want to nip it in the bud, because you probably won't want to go down this discussion that much, say it doesn't have to be an issue. It's bipartisan. Look, we have a co-sponsor in the House. It's bipartisan in the House. Done. And then that would normally end any kind of concerns that it would be really one party or the other. No, we have sponsors on both sides. So,
Hadia, next question.
Yes, so Mary said, cost benefit wise, the Peace Corps is not expensive. So she's wondering if we have any data or resources to support that claim.
Well, all right, I'll take a crack at that one. We've done some baseline number crunching on it in the past. If you pull out the back of the envelope and do the math in terms of the set appropriation that Peace Corps gets, so we're talking just the $410 million. So it's important to note that Peace Corps does get other funds through other agreements with other agencies. One good example of that is the former, under the Bush administration, the president's, I forget, it was called PEPFAR, the president's emergency plan to reduce AIDS. And so a lot of volunteers have been funded through PEPFAR dollars. But the baseline dollar figure for Peace Corps, if you divide the number of volunteers that were out in the field a year ago by 410 million, the number comes to something like $60,000, $55,000. And that's, I remember one time there was somebody who was a foreign service officer who said that basically, and Joel, you might know these numbers better than I, but they indicated that one foreign service officer is about three to maybe even 4 times the cost of one Peace Corps volunteer using that kind of formula. And to Tim's point that was made earlier about Halloween costumes for pets, there's a number of different ways. I know many of you have heard the analogy that's been used in the past about the funding for military marching bands and how that is higher than Peace Corps funding. There's other ways that you can maybe look at it from the local level. We still contend it's a bang for its buck. And we've looked at when the first time 410 million was passed. So Peace Corps has been getting that now for going on 6 years. And if you bring that to the present day and adjust for inflation, the number right now is right on with $450 million. So we're basically asking just to give the agency in this next fiscal year the same purchasing power that it had 6 years ago.
Jonathan, that's good information. I'm going to suggest a couple of things that Glenn always uses that I find resonate with me. To answer that person's question, that it's a return on investment. Use business terms, it's a return on investment, and Peace Corps service pays lifelong dividends to this country, not just to the volunteer, but it pays lifelong dividends to this country and the careers that people follow.
Hadia or Cecina, either one.
Yes, one more question from Tina. For legislators who are supporters of Peace Corps, how effective is it to ask them to talk to their colleagues about supporting Peace Corps bills or signing on to the Dear Colleague letter?
I'll just do a quick jump on that. Congress is a game of look around to see which way the wind is blowing and who's doing what. It is a remarkable dynamic, and bills and political support takes on a momentum of its own when one can least expect or predict it. And so critical members who are on, for example, maybe the person you're advocating to sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee or the Foreign Relations Committee. That critical member could bring 10 or 15 or 20 other people on board just because they're on the key committee that oversees the Peace Corps. So it all matters. It all adds up. A Republican, as Athena said, is on this bill. All of a sudden that gives political cover to 10 other Republicans. And before you know it, you've got the makings of what's perceived as a viable bill because it has that bipartisan support. So that's why we do this. That's why this is happening. That's why these advocacy asks go, because it's not like this one time alone is the only time that something will happen. Congress is a repetitive game. The legislative process, there are windows that open and close and open and close, and people are continually moving forward. And so signing on to bills and letters and getting people supporting them and having numbers go up and up, and 20, 30, 50, 100, 120, that momentum helps move things through the process to get a congressional hearing, ultimately get passed by a committee, ultimately even to the floor to become passed by one chamber, and then hopefully through into law. That's the goal here. It's a 2-year process. Each bill gets 2-year shelf life before it expires and has to be reintroduced. So it's critical. It's the blood.
And jumping off that, I see Susie's question or comment about what about state legislators or governors who maybe have some sway, and that's very true. And one of the things I remember, I was in a workshop one time where somebody laid out a setting where it was like you've got 5 people in the room and sitting in a circle, and they're talking about who's the person they want to influence. And the question is, I can't influence this person, but maybe who do I know that can influence that person? So if there's state lawmakers that we have, there's a number of RPCVs who are state representatives or mayors or who might have pipelines directly. And within our own community, we have increasingly been trying to identify, and we do have, and Tim Garvin's a good example of this. Tim, over his years of work at the United Way and with the other advocacy work he does, he knows those offices and they know who Tim is. And so, so Tim is somebody that can pick up the phone and make sure that the message is heard. And there's other people in our community like that who have a direct line, and we continue to try to cultivate them and find them and be able to utilize them. And certainly that's something you can help us do too through exploring with your Peace Corps circles who might know a particular lawmaker.
Jonathan, can I cut in for a second?
Yep.
First of all, thank you for that. I work in Massachusetts. I have the easiest delegation in the country to get support for the Peace Corps. And in fact, it hurts me if I don't get every single member of the Massachusetts delegation to sign the Dear Colleague letter or to become co-sponsors. It is a stupid little competition I have with myself. The second thing is, as so many people, and I think it was Athena and I think it was Lori who said, and maybe it was Mary who asked a great question. It's not just what we did over there, it's now what we're doing here. And that return on our investment is the Americans we've become. Or you look at what Joel has done, and every single person on this call. The third thing is, if you find that person, a state legislator or a federal legislator who really likes it, don't just tweet out. If you get to know them well enough, ask if they'd be willing to co-write an op-ed with you about the value of the Peace Corps, because then you're helping to tell your story, but they're putting their name on it also. And that's really powerful.
Other questions? We probably should wind this down, folks, but we can take a couple more questions. Are there more out there?
I just have one listed right now. It's from Judy and Ron Inskeep, and they're asking specifically for contact with other RPCVs in their congressional district, Pennsylvania's 4th. And they're asking how to, I guess maybe more generally, how to connect with other RPCVs in the district. Hopefully, they're hoping to get a younger face in their constituency.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat and I just looked. That's Representative Madeline Dean in Pennsylvania. So what we're trying to do in certain states, so with our fantastic advocacy coordinators around the country, in many states, we are counting on them to take the lead in coordinating and getting meetings going. But then there are other states where we don't have those coordinator positions, and Pennsylvania is one of them. And so we are trying to individually reach out. I know we've reached out to a couple of offices in Pennsylvania where what we've basically been doing is with the letter writing system that I was showing you. We've tried to reach out to people who have used that system, who have shown their interest in advocating for the Peace Corps, to see if there's a couple of them that would be willing to take a lead on a meeting. We certainly, if we haven't done it already, we certainly can do Madeline Dean, and I'll make a note of that. So maybe we can do that. And that just points to the fact that we hope for some of you, if you're not connected yet to any, I know a lot of you on this call are already in the planning stages, but for those of you who aren't, we would really like to expand the map and continue to get more and more meetings set over the next 6 weeks. So if you still have some hesitations for a variety of reasons, we will try to work with you with everything from trying to find somebody to maybe even if you're by yourself, and if we can time it out, then Miriam or I or one of our interns could join in on a meeting with you, so that you're teamed up with somebody. But yeah, so happy to work with you, Judy, on that. Thanks. Any other questions?
I think that's it between me and Hadia.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody.